All right. Hello, everybody. Nobody ever has to do that, but we appreciate it. So this is my good friend, former colleague, still works at Amazon. Rich, I always wonder if I mangle your last name. Is it Hua or what is it?
Oh, you got it right.
Hua.
Exactly.
Okay. Very good. So Rich Hua is currently at Amazon. He's your LinkedIn says evangelist. I've always wondered, what is your actual title? Because it's totally fair that LinkedIn is written in English and not in Amazon, but what is your Amazon title?
My Amazon title is Principal Worldwide Go-to-Market Specialist for Aurora Postgres.
That is awesome. That I wrote that in one of my announcements, and that is like the biggest mouthful ever. Yeah. So that's I had a friend, he joined Microsoft really early, and he tried to petition them to give him the title Mighty Evil Master, and they wouldn't do it.
I wonder why.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I'm going to turn you up a little. You're probably a little soft, but then we're good to go. So the backstory with Rich, we're going to cover two things today. Rich has one of the most unusual career backgrounds I've ever run into, and he's agreed to share some of that. And then secondly, Rich has embarked on a quest, and his quest is amazing. His quest is to take his passion and knowledge for emotional intelligence and share that broadly within the over 1 million employees in Amazon, as well as in Amazon subsidiaries, and then I'm sure ideally beyond that into the world. So within Amazon, he's taught an introduction to emotional intelligence, which I have seen before, and some of you may have as well. But he's taught it now to close to 30,000 people, which in and of itself is impressive. But doing that while being the principal go-to-market specialist for an AWS service, so doing it as a side job is amazing. But what will amaze even more than that is when Rich graduated, and we'll talk a little bit about his background, when he graduated from Berkeley with a BS in electrical engineering and computer science, he then spent over 20 years in the ministry. So he's coming to this second career leading technology and teaching emotional intelligence after several years as a missionary and then 20 years leading a church. So we're going to go through how he made that pivot. I'm curious how much he feels working on emotional intelligence helped him do it. And then we'll hear from him how to apply that emotional intelligence. And then we'll take questions for as long as we can at the end. And I'm going to lead off with a question that happened to me just today where I had maybe an emotional intelligence failure. So Rich can help me with that. Or maybe I could have done better. So without further ado, Rich, anything I missed, anything you want to say about your background or by way of introduction?
Yeah, thank you for that warm introduction. First of all, I feel like it's a privilege and a pleasure to be able to be here with you today. I thank everyone for joining and listening to my dramatic career shift, maybe call it a curious career. But you said it well. I went to Cal Berkeley and I got a degree in electrical engineering and computer science. I love technology. In fact, the reason I actually got into it was I really enjoyed video games growing up. And I thought, hey, I'm going to maybe make some video games as a job. That would be really fantastic. So I studied, really more of the computer science side of EECS. But then I had a real life change while I was there, emotionally, spiritually. And I thought, I would actually really like to work with people. And so I got very inspired to be able to help people, help them develop, help them grow, help them succeed. And so I wound up being a missionary in the Philippines out of college. I was there for about 3 years with my newly married wife, Antoinette. And then I came back to the San Francisco Bay Area and served as an evangelist and a minister in a large church here for over 20 years. And so I always kept my thumb on technology. I really love technology, always enjoyed it. It was always an interest of mine, but I was definitely obviously focused on people, public speaking, counseling, things like that. So I think there is actually a lot of melding of emotional intelligence with that because, emotional intelligence really is about understanding and managing yourself and then understanding and managing relationships in a positive way. So no matter what job you're in, that's going to have some benefit.
Awesome. I agree with that, by the way. I would say, in fact, that oftentimes people think it's hard skills that get a job and build a career. But what we found when I was at Amazon, I'm sure nothing has changed, we found that hard skills were a huge lever to get people started on a career, but they were what we called necessary, not sufficient. So you actually needed the soft skills, the interpersonal skills, to succeed and thrive. So well, that's a great summary. So what would you say? I just got to know, you talked from Berkeley forward, I talked from Berkeley forward. If we start, what was life for Rich before Berkeley? Like, what led you up to that point?
Okay. Thank you for asking that question. So I was born in Taiwan in a little town called Kaohsiung. Actually, not a little town. It's actually a fairly decent sized city. Then I came to America when I was about 3.5 years old. I grew up in the Illinois area. Eventually went to school in Downers Grove, Illinois. If anybody's out there from that area, went to Downers Grove South. But I was very awkward, socially maladapted, had some real challenges in even managing my own self. I today would have been diagnosed with ADHD. I basically went to this little preschool program when I was about 3 years old, and I basically got kicked out after half a day.
Wow.
The teachers took me home to my mom and said, "We cannot handle this kid. He is just destroying our classroom. So bring him back in a year." So I had a lot of challenges. And then coming to America, I didn't speak English because I spoke Mandarin at home. And so when I went to school in kindergarten, they actually thought I was mentally deficient. They stuck me in the corner and basically thought I had some real serious cognitive issues, because I wouldn't even answer my name. They say, "Hey, Richard." And I'd be like, "Huh?" Because that's not the name I used at home. So it was a pretty rugged childhood. And then I, eventually kind of learned that, wow, I'm pretty cognitively intelligent. I can actually memorize things, learn things. I enjoy reading, at grade levels above. And I decided to really focus on that. And I thought, I'm going to succeed in life by trying to be the smartest person in the room. And,
okay, well, now you're on common ground with a lot of our viewers.
Yeah. And I thought, let me just go for it. And you know what? It kind of worked for a while, right? I studied really hard, worked really, really hard in high school. I actually wound up getting a perfect score on the SAT, one of 8 people that year in my junior year. Memorized the 50,000 most commonly found words in the SAT.
Wow.
And did it, right? I was like, okay, I got it. But then when I got to college, I actually suddenly realized no matter how smart I am, there's tons of people who are smarter. I took honors physics and I literally didn't understand a single thing the professor said. I went from, I thought I was smart to, wow, I'm really not as much as I thought. And then I tried building relationships, and I did this thing called get married. And that kind of threw a giant wrench into the whole, I'm going to be a genius robot and succeed in life. And then I had this other thing called have children, and that completely sent it down the toilet. So I realized, I'm going to have to work on this emotional part if I'm going to really succeed in life.
Okay, this session just got way better than I was expecting it, because I did not, I know Rich and we've worked together. We've talked many times, but I did not know this piece of his history as a highly focused academic overachiever. And because he's so broad today, I would not have pictured that. And so I started right where you did, right?
Yeah.
I added into it a healthy dose of arrogance. And I used to say, well, people call me a loose cannon, but that's only because I'm pointed at them. So, I had emotional non-intelligence, like, oh, they're only mad at me because I'm telling them off about how wrong they are. That's their problem.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know that. Yeah, that healthy dose of arrogance I can definitely relate to, and oftentimes it became an unhealthy dose.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
right.
All right.
Yeah.
So I join you on a life trajectory there.
Yeah.
So I don't talk too much about religion on this stream, but I'm a Christian. You obviously were a pastor at a Christian church. Does that come from your early background? Is that how you were raised, or is that something you discovered along the way?
Yeah, I was raised going to church, and in Illinois, it has two purposes. One is the spiritual part, and the second is back in the 70s and 80s, that was the only way to meet other Chinese people.
Ah,
Because, we lived pretty much, it was very, very Caucasian. Most people in Illinois, Midwest, they're all
right.
white.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you wanted to find another Chinese person, you had to go to the Chinese church. And so I actually grew up doing that. So it was a whole day affair, right? You went to church, Sunday school, church. I mean, you were there from 9 a.m. to basically 5 p.m. because you also had a potluck where all the moms compared their cooking skills. Then you had Chinese school, where you learned the language. So it was like this whole affair. Right? So, so I grew up with that sort of cultural, spiritual experience. But I'd say I wasn't really practicing. It was just sort of a cultural thing. I did it, and I had sort of a foundation of some belief system. But in college, I had what I would call maybe a transformation, a spiritual awakening. And I realized this is actually really important to me. And even though I really like technology, I was really inspired by the idea that I could actually change people's lives for the better. And so I went on this journey of sort of self exploration, decided, this is really what I believe I should be doing. I felt a calling. And I married my wife, Antoinette, who's Filipino, and we got a chance to go to her homeland. And we lived in Manila for about 3 years and worked with people. So I'd say that was a sort of a rapid development of something that I had when I was younger.
So, well, let's talk about that a little bit. You had just completed, I mean, you earned your way in with your perfect SAT score, which is amazing, into one of the premier universities on earth. You got a super techie double degree or double major, EE and CS. And then you headed off to the Philippines to save souls. How did you make that, transformation?
That's really funny. First of all, my parents were thrilled that all of their college education money went to funding a missionary in the Philippines. No, all jokes aside, they were actually pretty supportive. Funny enough, my parents, I must say, I really appreciate them. Amazing mom and dad worked super hard to bring us here, but they were not the typical tiger mom or dad. They actually never once told me to study growing up that I remember. So very strange from a Chinese, parent, because I actually studied so much. They actually told me stop studying so much, like go out there and make some friends. So, I don't know which one was more sort of part of that compelling driver. But, I really, again, I had the aptitude for technology, but I really felt a calling to be able to work with people. So pretty much the day after I graduated, got my degree, I walked on May 25th, 1991. And you'd probably go, well, why would you remember that date? Because I got married on May 26th, 1991. So I basically got my degree diploma, and the next day I had my wedding. So let's say the graduation was a little bit anticlimactic comparatively. And then we went off to the Philippines. But yeah, I mean, I think that there are two sides of me that I've always enjoyed, even though my cognitive interests were around technology. I always had kind of this emotional interest in being able to work with people that just had not been very developed up until that time. And so I think being able to follow that allowed me to expand my horizons there.
Okay. Well, that's pivot one. And I guess the place where emotional intelligence comes into that pivot is awareness that that was important to you. And obviously, we haven't defined emotional intelligence much, but I'm curious, did you have any trouble? Was there, if you consider going to the Philippines to become a missionary, getting a job, did you have any trouble getting that job as an engineer? Or was that, were people like, no, we totally think you'd be great? I mean, you're not Filipino, you're not a minister, but it's okay, like circuits and it all goes together. Come on over.
Yeah. So one of the things that I actually really did enjoy, even though I decided to focus on the cognitive engineering parts, I actually always enjoyed public speaking. I was on the speech team in high school, competed actually at the national level. And so I actually always liked communicating. So from that perspective, it seemed like it was a good fit because I had some skills in those areas. So I'd say presentation skills, presenting skills, logical analysis, maybe taking, putting together sermons or lessons or, training people and things were parts of my skill set that I actually felt like I had. The part that was a little more deficient was having empathy and understanding other people's feelings.
Mm.
Now you may think, well, what's a guy who has problems with that doing being a minister? Well, I want to develop it. I was eager to learn. There's a church in the Philippines that was willing to hire me. And I thought, let's give it a try, man. If you're willing to give me a chance, I'm willing to work on it. And boy, I tell you, that was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. Just one of the most heartwarming, transformative opportunities to be able to work with people who have so little, but were so actually happy and so relationally connected to each other more than I had experienced.
And yeah. I've never done any level of the mission work you have, but I had that same experience elsewhere where sometimes the people who have the least material stuff seem to be the happiest. Like we delude ourselves. It's an aside to our discussion here, but we delude ourselves that more stuff is going to make us happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Someone in chat says, up next, Ethan the minister. I've considered it. I have preached at least once, so it can happen again.
Well, yeah. It's funny. Laurie Santos actually has a really well-known class that she's done at Yale. It's actually the single most popular class at Yale. And it's called The Science of Happiness. And now it's free on Coursera, but she talks about really the science behind the fact that we essentially are really, really bad at predicting our own happiness. And we think all these things will make us happy. And most of the time we find out it doesn't. And then she talks about the things it really does, right? And that sense of meaning, purpose, and connection is absolutely universally, scientifically backed reason for being happy. So I'm grateful I discovered that early on. In my late teen years in college, rather than waiting till I'm 50, figuring that out. So
then you came back.
Yep.
And I'm a little fuzzy on this. Did you join a church or found a church? What was your role?
I joined.
Okay.
I basically became, I led a large portion of a non-denominational church that was here in the San Francisco area. And then I also we had like sister congregations all over the Pacific Northwest. So I actually oversaw a group of several thousand people from San Francisco all the way up through Alaska of the Pacific Northwest and worked with them. And that was for about 21 years.
Wow. Okay. And so I assume in that, well, let me ask, assumptions are so dangerous. where I know now you've studied emotional intelligence very deeply. You've connected, and I'm sure you'll share a little of this. You've connected to some people at Google and some other experts in the field. Rich can, by the way, even sort of name drop in this space. He's becoming well enough known and connected to be in touch with some of the authorities in the field, which is fantastic. He probably wouldn't name drop, which is why I have to mention it for him that he could. But when did you sort of transform to a formal study of emotional intelligence? Was that still in ministry or not until you moved to technology?
It was about 15 years ago. I was still in the ministry, and I happened upon a book called Emotional Intelligence: Why EQ can matter more than IQ, written by Daniel Goleman. Right, seminal book, came out in 1995, and it literally changed the landscape of really the business world. That these soft skills might actually be more important than the quote hard skills.
Yep. And
he had such a compelling track and thought and science behind it. And I went, holy moly, this is it. This is the thing that I've been underdeveloped in, that I've been working on, and this could really help transform a lot of people's lives and success. So I started working on things for myself, specifically around emotional intelligence. And then about 12 years ago, I developed a training system for people in my congregation because I thought, hey, this could help you too. So I got to present it at kind of one of our big seminars. It was very well received. And then I had a friend at Google named Doug, who basically is like, hey, there's this dude at Google doing a lot of similar things to what you're doing at our church. You should meet him. His name's Meng Tan. And no one knew Meng at that time, right? Even though he was like employee 107, he was known as an engineer.
Yeah.
But he's like, you guys should have lunch. So we wound up having lunch. And then he was developing something at Google that eventually became Search Inside Yourself, which is, grown around the world. And then I was developing my stuff. And we're still friends this day. He's one of my mentors and advisors. But I got the good fortune of being able to talk with him about that.
And mods, maybe a couple of you, maybe awesome, you could post links to the Google book Search Inside Yourself, as well as the Emotional Intelligence book, just for others who are looking for them. You could post them in chat so that people have a record of them. Thank you. Okay. Well, so then we get to the big pivot. Here, you've been 21 years, you were precise, at the church, and you leave the church and join Oracle. And two super curious questions. One is why, and the other is how. So,
okay. Yep. So the why was actually pretty personal. My faith was still very strong, but my wife was not doing well in her health. The bottom line is she had developed some mysterious symptoms and we didn't really know what was going on. And we just needed to basically have a change of pace. Being in the ministry was, 24/7, loved it. Really, really enjoyed working with people.
And joining a tech company is going to slow that right down for you.
Yeah, exactly. But for her sake, I thought, you know what, because we were doing it together, actually. One thing I should mention is she and I were in the ministry together. So we were doing everything as a couple. And so we thought, okay, we need to do something a bit different so that she can get a little more rest and kind of explore what's going on with her health. Very tough decision, but, we really felt like that was the direction we needed to go in. Good news is she's a lot better. So I think it was a great decision.
Great.
But so that's basically why I actually still really loved and had that passion to work with people, but I thought we have to do something differently from a career perspective. So I basically resigned in September of 2012, and I got 3 months runway, and I start furiously looking for a job, and I go try to find the last resume I'd actually submitted, and I dug one up, and I figured the last one I actually wrote was in 1988. For a summer job, and I went, okay, well, let's dust this baby off and see if I can update it. So I pull it out.
I do resume reviews as part of this channel. Like, I open most shows by putting a resume up, and we discuss what's good and bad about it. And somebody in chat saying he was born in 1988, which is going to be true of a lot of the viewers. But what a challenge. Hey, Ethan, I'd like help constructing a tech industry resume. I graduated from Berkeley. That's good. And then 20 years preaching. We're going to go from there. Awesome challenge. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, it was quite something. I will tell you, there were a few things that really made a huge difference. One was obviously it was so old. And two, translating all those skills that I had actually gotten in the ministry to tech. I had no idea what I was doing, but I will tell you this. I did a few things that I think made a huge difference. One was I read a lot of books. I read two key ones were, What Color Is Your Parachute? Of course.
I recommend it all the time.
And then the other one was The Startup of You by Reid Hoffman and Ben Casnocha. And really those two books really made a huge difference. And the Startup of You talked about being in permanent beta, right? Your career should always be permanent beta. You're always trying to improve and grow, really what we call the day one mindset, right? At Amazon.
Sure.
And so I read those. And then a bunch of other books that really helped me, like Linchpin by Seth Godin, another one about just becoming, really a linchpin in your organization. But then the other thing I did was I got a lot of help from people who knew a heck of a lot better than I did. I had the good fortune of having essentially changed the lives of like lots of people who were in the tech industry.
Sure.
So they kind of owed me one. So I'm like, hey guys, I'm kind of in a little bit of a bind here. Can you help me with this resume? And I must have gone over 50 different versions before submitting the first one. But every time I did it, kind of like a PRFAQ at Amazon, a narrative. It just got better and better and better and better. And eventually I had something I actually felt pretty confident in. And that's what I started using to apply.
Which really, you've touched on something else I share with the channel all the time, which is networking, networking, networking. You were using a network you had built through completely other means and without that purpose. You never set out to like, oh, I'm going to connect with tech people, so one day when I want to go back to tech, I can call in favors.
Yeah.
But you had a network and you used that in your job search. And so that's a great lesson we talk about all the time here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
All right. Go ahead.
Well, actually, let me. Do you? Let me tell you a story about the job. Actually,
Okay, please.
It's kind of wild. So, I through my network, I had a friend named Jeff who connected me. I decided that maybe a great career would be a solutions architect or a sales engineer because I had the tech and I had the sort of ability to, sell, talk to people, help them understand things. So I had a friend who basically connected me with a hiring manager at Oracle. And they had an open position for quite some time. And so they said, hey, Jeff told me, I think you'd actually be really good for this position, but you're probably gonna have a really hard time since you have basically no experience. But I will connect you with the hiring manager and at least he'll have a conversation as a favor to me.
Okay.
So I basically got on the phone with the hiring manager and I go, yep, I'd really like to do this position and, tell me more about it. And then the guy basically says, hey, so what's your background, Ben? And I said, he said, Jeff didn't tell me. So he just said, I should talk to you. So what's your experience? I go, well, I've been an evangelist for a church for the last 20 some odd years. Silence for 30 seconds. And then after he composes himself, he's like, okay, well, why are you interested in this job? So I had to persuade him to even give me the time of day. I talked about my, EECS degree, Berkeley, all that. So at the end of the day, he's like, look, I'll give you an interview just as a favor from my friend, but honestly, you have like basically no chance of getting this job. We're actually looking for someone with a lot of experience because we want a senior SA and not somebody with no experience. But as a favor, I'll do it. So are you willing to try? I go, I'm absolutely willing to try. He goes, okay, you have 1 week to learn about this advanced technology at Oracle and do a presentation and maybe you'll kill it and we'll hire you. So I sent him my resume, which had been tuned. He saw something about it that must have piqued his interest. So he invited his VP to come to the interview. I get lots and lots of impact or feedback on my presentation. I get tons and tons of dry run and practices. I go in a week and I do it. And they offered me a job on the spot.
Wow.
And, I actually wound up being hired as a senior solutions architect at Oracle. So that's what happened. That was the kind of miraculous story.
So this will be cut out, by the way, and made into a short video because it's important because we'll cut it out and make it a short video to give people the encouragement that it is possible to get any job with preparation and support and focus. And then, of course, Chat's saying it would be hard to go into that talk confident. So tell me a little bit, after being told you had no choice, and I'm sure you or very little chance, and knowing that your background was, shall we say, generously non-traditional, how did you control your mental state to interview strongly? Because I'm sure that's what a lot of people struggle with. Is how to go into that room and own it.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things. There are 3 things that I think actually made a huge difference. The first was just preparation, lots of hard work. I mean, I studied my brains out to understand this technology. It was essentially real application clusters, a database technology that allows you to have high availability. I'm like, database, HA, what is it, even all that stuff? I had these sort of mental chops because of my background, but I hadn't done it in so long. So I really worked hard, and preparation really does give you confidence. At least you feel like I've done the work. The second thing was lots of feedback and input. I got 3 of my friends, again, from my network, who all had worked at or still were working at Oracle. And I basically had them, do dry runs with me. So I presented, I got feedback, so I did it several times so that I could feel confident because of feedback and that feedback loop. And then the third thing was I actually did a lot. I prayed a lot, to be honest. I try to calm myself. I would meditate, I'd breathe, and I prayed.
Oh,
And I was like, hey, I could use a little extra help here from the big guy. I've kind of done a few good things for you. Could you do me a little favor? So, and then I asked a lot of my friends to do the same thing. So I felt that sense of support.
nice.
And so whatever method people use to be able to feel that sense of, hey, I've got people behind me or even a higher power, those three things definitely help me be able to go in and do it.
Wow, that is a compelling story end to end.
I'll tell
I
you one
will just.
final thing.
Oh yeah,
One,
please.
one crazy thing, right, is, and whether or not you believe in sort of the supernatural or not, obviously I do, but I actually prayed for a specific amount that they would offer me that I would get the job and I get a specific offer, right? So I go in and basically after it, the VP turns to me and says, "Wow, that was a great presentation. How much money you want to make?" I said, "Why don't you name a number?" And she named exactly the number I'd prayed for.
Wow.
And I go, "I'll take it." So that's basically my interview.
Well, it's interesting. I wouldn't normally end up sharing this, but when I interviewed at Amazon, I won't go through the whole story. I flew in late at night. I went. The only thing open in my hotel that had food when I got in late was the bar. So I went into the bar to get bar food because it was the only option left. And I met a guy who was having a very hard night. He was crying on the bar stool. And I felt called. It's a very Christian evangelical world, which some people would be like, called? Your phone was ringing? No, I felt compelled to spend time with him. I'm supposed to interview at Amazon the next morning. So I stay up until the bar closes, like 2 or 3 a.m., supporting this guy. And then I go to my room and I'm going to get like no sleep. So my version of your story is I got up in the morning, I had a pot of coffee delivered room service. And I told God, I said, you wanted me on that bar stool last night. This interview is totally on you. If you, I've already given up on it. I'm writing it off. So if you want something from it, you're going to have to step in. And the rest is history, my career at Amazon. So I could tell, but that's just such an interesting coincidence.
That's a great story.
So I don't want to hold up any longer on EQ. You have this hour-long, obviously well-polished discussion of the basics of EQ. Would you like to take us through it?
Yeah. And before I jump into that a little bit, I did want to talk about just a couple of things, of mental
please.
models. There are a few sort of mental models or mindsets that I actually believe have helped in terms of career. And they actually help just in life in general. It's, any relationship, anything that you want to succeed at, as well as your career, of course. And one of them is the growth mindset, right? Carol Dweck talks a lot about that.
Totally.
Right? That idea, we call it day one mindset, at Amazon. There's a lot of different words for it, but essentially is I'm always growing. I'm always learning. I'm always changing. And I really believe that's super important to be able to really continue to succeed in any career. And EQ would call it adaptability, but that's the ability to continuously change and evolve. And I love Carol Dweck's comment about how to actually talk about it. It's admitting that you're not good at something, but just adding the word yet.
Yet.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I did my interview at Oracle, I'm like, well, I'm not good at databases yet. I'm not good at being a solutions architect yet, but I will get there, right? And that actually helped me kind of both admit an area that was a challenge, but also realize that one day, I can get there. Sorry, were you gonna say something?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
What's the other thing?
The other thing, and so that involves coachability, right? The willingness to learn and grow. The other thing is reading a lot. And if people have challenges reading, listening to audiobooks or videos or whatever it may be, but just consistently taking in new ideas and thoughts. I love this quote from Harry Truman. He said, "Not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers," right? Like this idea that if you really want to influence others, You have to be able to do that. And I tell you, reading those books when I came out of that ministry life really opened my mind. Like, oh wow, this is how I can actually move ahead in my career and things that I can do. The third one is being a giver. And you and I both talked about that. You have a story of that, right, with the guy in the bar stool. But
Yep.
I really believe whatever you call it, karma, or, you reap what you sow, whatever you call it, the idea of being a giver and looking for opportunities to help other people and do good for others, I think is so powerful, because you never know when it's going to come back. You really, really don't. And you can't do it because you're expecting something. You do it because you do it. You feel like it's the right thing and it's meaningful and it makes a difference. And so I've always had this attitude of, hey, give to your colleagues, give to your organization. Certainly at Amazon, we give to our customers a lot, and even give it to your boss, right? And that's a little pro tip. A lot of people think my relation with my boss is his or her job to make me successful. Well, it's also our job to make them successful. And if we decide to be a giver, it makes a huge difference for us and them and the whole organization. One tip that I was given when I was interviewing was, somebody said, hey, when you get your first job, during your first one-on-one, you should ask your boss, hey, what can I do for you? What can I do to help make you successful? And I remember having my first one-on-one at Oracle, and I asked my boss, his name was Ali, he's now actually at Amazon. And I go, hey, what can I do to make you successful? And he just kind of looked at me and went, what? Apparently no one had ever asked him that before. I said, no, really, what can I do to help you? He's like, I have no idea. Let me think about it. He was so taken aback. But then, you know what? The next day goes, I got a great idea. Here's something. And from then on, we had this back and forth relationship that really made a huge difference for my career success.
Yeah. So I got to say, Rich, I teach this thing on my channel I call the magic loop. And I just want to say, Rich is not a paid advertiser for that. Because you just literally described what I tell people to do. I tell them, do your job well. Like, first, you've got to be doing your basic job.
Yep.
And then go ask your boss how you can help, and then do what they ask. And you just repeat this loop, and you will soar forward. And everyone who implements it or tries it reports back to me like, wow, that really worked. I actually had someone come to me yesterday and say, it's working too well. They want to put me in a position I'm not even sure I'm ready for. But yeah, Rich is not a paid advertisement. This is.
Yeah, I'm not getting any kickbacks for that.
Yeah, it's amazing though how convergent our experiences are.
Yeah, well, I think it's a universal truth of relationships, right? It's not rocket science. It's a universal truth of how relationships work, that when you do that, it absolutely helps everyone around you. It's sort of the tide that lifts all the boats.
Yes.
And sometimes we think all the leaders of the tide, but we as the employees and people reporting it to other leaders are part of that tide, right? And the final thing I will say that's a mental model also is to be a linchpin, right? Figure out how to be a linchpin. I read that book from Seth Godin during that time where I was looking for a job, and it really struck me, because it's the idea of finding a gap and solving a problem, and then leveraging your strengths to add unique value to solve something that maybe you are especially, skilled or able to do. And boy, I tell you, no matter what organization you're in, there are plenty of problems. There are plenty of things to solve. Everyone's got issues and challenges. And so if we can figure out where are my skills, where are my interests, and where are the problems, and find a way to fill that gap, I guarantee that there will be many, many opportunities to be able to proceed. And that's what I've done at Amazon with emotional intelligence, right? I saw an opportunity where we do a lot of things amazingly well from an operational perspective, leadership principles, obviously one of the most innovative companies in the world, but there's an opportunity to grow in our stress management, empathy, inspirational leadership. And I thought, this is what I'm into. And so 30,000 people later, here we are, right?
Wow. I need to make you a paid advertisement, because another thing I tell people is work on your passion. work in an area you're passionate, and you will tend to excel because it's easy for you to invest and do your best work in something you care about. So it's not, to me, at all surprising that a topic you already cared about deeply, you were able to do great work on that topic. And yeah, it's obviously the fact that it spread to 30,000 and is growing rapidly within Amazon is even more amazing.
Yeah, yeah. There's a great concept that you may have talked about, but it's Japanese ikigai, right? And it's the idea that your life's work is the intersection of these four things. It's what you're good at, it's what you're passionate about, it's what people will pay you for, what's in demand, and it's what will have meaning and purpose. And if you can find the intersection of ikigai, you have it made. Now, it'll take time, right? I didn't find it really in a sense until more recent. I did many things, obviously really passionate, but then in the tech world, being able to do that. So, it's a journey.
Awesome.
Well, let me share my screen. And are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah, totally. And I'm going to flip over our view to just Rich and his slides. So you won't see me anymore, and you won't see chat on screen anymore, so that you can see his slides. And I do see it's cropping a tiny bit to the left. I think we'll just live with that, unless it ends up mattering. So...
And let me ask you, Ethan, how much time should I leave at the end for a question and answer? I can tailor.
Well, we've done a lot of talking up front, so I don't know. Like, it would be good. Well, it also, I think you have a hard stop at 2. I don't know. But I see you looking down to check that out.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm good till 2. So
I would say, maybe if we're done by 1:45, we can do a couple questions. I want to hit you up with my situation, and then I can always continue with the questions to the best of my ability after you're gone for a little while. So take it away. And I'm not sure why the screen capture is slightly eating one of your slides, but I can always play with that.
So. Okay, no worries. And I think I can actually be done by 1:30. I have a little bit of a condensed version, so I think we should be okay. So I'm going to talk about emotional intelligence to boost your career success. Obviously I've talked a lot about just EQ or emotional intelligence in general. Some call it EI. But essentially what it entails is these 4 domains of, our existence. It's a self-awareness and self-management. Those are what would be called personal competencies, and then social awareness and relationship management, which you could call social competencies. And as Ethan actually alluded to earlier, research has actually shown that emotional intelligence accounts for much more of your success in your career than IQ after a certain point, right? So the way that Daniel Goleman describes it is, he calls IQ or cognitive abilities like your threshold capabilities. They get you through the door. Whereas EQ, or the emotional side, is what he calls the distinguishing abilities. They are what make you a star. So once you're smart enough to do a job, if you really want to grow and progress and become a star performer, that's all in that realm of EQ, right? Think about your peers on your job right now, whatever you happen to be doing. There are probably a lot of pretty smart people that are about the same in terms of cognitive ability. How are you going to be, a star? Being smarter? Probably not. It's much more likely you'll distinguish yourself with qualities like cognitive control, grit, staying cool under pressure, the ability to manage yourself and your relationships in a healthy and productive way. And this becomes even more pronounced as you take on leadership roles, right? So according to Goleman, of all kinds of jobs, about 2/3 is related to emotional intelligence. Whereas when you become a leader, manage people, have to influence stakeholders, it becomes 85% of your long-term success. That's pretty intense. And so at a fundamental level, what is EQ? It's one of the 3 things that impacts how you think and how you act, right? You have your cognitive abilities, you have your personality, and then you have this EQ, which I just mentioned is these 4 domains. I actually love this quote from Meng Tan, who I mentioned earlier. He says the aim of developing emotional intelligence is to help you optimize yourself and function at an even higher level than what you're already capable of. And really, it's this idea, again, some would call it the growth mindset, but it's an overall ability to develop a whole set of skills that can really make a huge difference. So, you ever heard the term career limiting maneuver?
Maybe I've made a few of those. Yeah.
They can certainly be because of mistakes or maybe quote failures, but a lot of times those happen because we're actually in an emotional state. We're angry, we're annoyed, we're anxious, and we do something that really is not very helpful for our career. So we do a career limiting maneuver, and there's a little bit of a picture that I think is tongue in cheek, but funny. Why is it so hard to manage ourselves sometimes, when there's really high emotions? And here's the answer, right? And of course, I'm joking, right? I wouldn't have to manage myself if people, would manage their stupidity. I show that because we've all felt that, right? Why am I angry? Well, it's because you're so stupid. Why am I angry? Because my boss is so stupid. Because my, people reporting me are stupid, or somebody else did something stupid. And here's the reality. We cannot manage other people's behavior, attitudes, and actions, but we can manage our reaction. And whether or not someone is doing something stupid or smart or that we just don't understand, there are effective and ineffective ways of reacting to that. So if you want to have a long and distinguished career, you have to be able to manage your own internal self so that you react to situations and people in a way that ultimately will be productive rather than unproductive, right? And so it's that ability to do that that's actually powerful. And you know what? There's actually an evolutionary reason for why we have this sort of what Daniel Goleman calls an amygdala hijacking or emotional hijacking. It's actually because of the way our brain works. Like evolutionary wise, when stimuli came into our brain, it would go into the oldest part, what some call the lizard brain, but neuroscientists call it the amygdala, the limbic system. And that's the part that basically you feel stuff. It goes there first, you feel a lot of stuff. And then it may take a few seconds to actually hit the prefrontal cortex, which is where we think rationally and make good decisions. So the bottom line is you feel first and you think second. And so if you do something based on the feeling without the thinking, then you may make a bad decision. Now, evolutionary wise is actually great because let's say you're out on, the plains or savannas and you see this thing that looks like a saber-toothed tiger. You just want to get the heck out of there, right? Like start running for your life. So it actually kept us alive. However, not so useful if you're in a meeting and your boss says something that really ticks you off. You probably don't want to do the first thing that you think of, maybe punch him in the face or say something annoying. So it was a great feature, and now it may be a little bit of a bug, and we need to do some upgrades to the operating system to help us be able to manage things in this new world that's, no more saber-toothed tigers running around. So that's the idea of emotional intelligence training. It's learning how to engage that prefrontal cortex in a way that helps us make better decisions, right? So again, you're against a really tough deadline. You're stressed out. A colleague or coworker says something that really makes you mad and you just want to lash out. You get a super annoying email from a customer and you just want to lash back at them because they made accusations that weren't accurate, right? So many things can happen. Maybe got passed over for a promotion. You're like, I can't believe that slouch over there got promoted and I didn't. And you want to, lash out at the people who are responsible for it. Like those are all things that won't necessarily be productive. And so learning to manage that will absolutely help us long-term in our career. One thing that is actually happening these days that I did want to ask about, and you can put into the chat, I think Ethan will actually see it, but
yeah, I can relay it. I'll see it. Go ahead.
Have you experienced any of these things over the last month or so? Difficulty sleeping, worried about work, family, other responsibilities, just different challenges. Anxiety upon waking, right when you wake up, it's like, woo, I got a lot of stress going on. Difficulty switching off in the evening. You're just basically trying to deal with things and your mind is still going. It's hard to just calm down and not think about all the things that you had to basically deal with during the day. negative changes in personality or personal relationships, irritability, detachment, just maybe more annoyed and, snapping at people, lack of enjoyment. Things that you found more enjoyable previously are now not as enjoyable, just not as fun or happy, happiness inducing. And then finally becoming more pessimistic or isolated, just feeling kind of like, a little more of a downer type of attitude when you used to be more up and positive, or maybe just detaching and isolated from relationships. Can anybody relate with these things, one or more?
Yeah, definitely. I, just speaking for me, well, because there's a little bit of lag for people to get back in chat. Now it's coming in. Yeah, boy, difficulty switching off and pessimism. Somebody says, unfortunately, yes, which I think means all of the above. I have trouble switching off in the evening, and that's one of my challenges, Rich, but that's what somebody else says. Somebody says, why you got to call me out like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I literally have all those things, definitely feeling like this during COVID. Switching on and off is difficult when my work machine is the same as my leisure computer. So that comes from one of our students who's obviously probably doing his homework and his gaming recreation on the same machine.
Right. Yep. Well, I've done this across obviously lots and lots of people, both at Amazon and then even some outside. And I've gotten, all the same responses. I have felt every single one of these at some point, and multiple ones over the last month, 2 months, 3 months. And here's what's basically happening to all of us. Okay. These are all symptoms of burnout. We're all burning out, and it's very real. Right. I mean, when the pandemic first started in March, it was kind of like, okay, get ready, move home or work from home or do this or do that. And we're basically getting ready to, sort of deal with this pandemic. And remember what we all thought? Hey, hopefully by the end of the summer, we'll be back to normal. Remember that? You're like, I hope this doesn't last too long. And so we dealt with the acute sort of emotional challenges, but now we're in the chronic, the long slosh. Right. And this may go on. This is going to go on for months. We don't know how long, but it's going to go on for some time more. And so being able to deal with these symptoms of burnout is actually really important, both from a personal perspective, but also from a career perspective. So these are things, and feel free to jump in at any point if you have a comment, Ethan. I just wanted to say that. So what are some things we can do? I did want to address this because there's sort of some general concepts about dealing with emotional intelligence, but then there's some specific ones for this time and era. So one of the things I like to talk about in terms of how to avoid burnout and hijacking and everything going on is this concept of buoyancy, being buoyant. When you see that bear there, just think of a word that comes to mind. A lot of people think relaxed, chilling, enjoying, playful, calm. And this is actually what we want to be in the midst of all the craziness that's going on around us, right? There's the standard craziness of life and job and all that pre-COVID, and now there's extra craziness because of all that's happening. But regardless of pre-COVID, post-COVID, inter-COVID, this idea of staying buoyant is actually important because it means that sometimes the waters will be nice and calm and it's easy to float. And sometimes they're going to be roiling about and there'll be 10-foot waves crashing down upon you. And being able to come back up to the surface and still float is emotionally what we want to be able to do if we're going to succeed in our careers. And so there are a few things that I'm going to talk about that I think can help us specifically with that, and then some interpersonal things as well that I'll talk about. So some things that'll help us to be buoyant is one of the most powerful concepts, this idea of self-compassion. Now it sounds like kind of a fluffy thing, but the reality, it just means, look at yourself in a productive way and give yourself a break where you need it, because everyone's going through a lot of stuff right now. And one of the things we do have to deal with is this idea of ambiguous loss, right? It's actually a psychological field of study and a condition. It basically means when you lost something, but you're not sure what you lost. It can be like a missing person. Like, you don't know, are they alive? Are they dead? It could be a family member with dementia. They're still alive, but they're really not the same person, right? It's ambiguous. And we're all experiencing that right now with the pandemic. We've lost freedom. We've lost things we used to enjoy. Maybe trust in government or the education system or the economy. We've lost rituals, right? Weddings, graduations, even funerals. Like we've lost things. We're not quite able to put our finger on it. And so just realizing that, life is different right now and it kind of sucks, basically, right? There are some things obviously we just can't control. They really are not happiness inducing. They really kind of suck. And it's okay to accept that. It doesn't mean giving up, but it means not fighting reality so you can apply your energy to areas that are productive, areas you can control rather than things you can't. And I was doing this presentation for a group of people at Amazon, and one person said, I use the phrase embrace the suck. Basically, just embrace it, and maybe you can become a better person or learn some things or grow because of that. So how do we do that? What are some skills that we can actually practice that will help us have that self-compassion and, in a sense, embrace the suck? Well, one of them is what I call the 3x3. And essentially, it's gratitude. It's spending time each day and writing down 3 things you're grateful for 3 weeks. And it's just focusing on things that we actually appreciate to counterbalance all the negative things that may be flying around, both internally and externally. Did you know that this is actually one of the main methods that cognitive behavioral therapists use to boost happiness for people who have depression? And for a lot of people, they actually found it even more effective than antidepressants because, believe it or not, gratitude produces both serotonin and dopamine, which are the 2 main key neurotransmitters that antidepressants target to increase. And so when you take time to be grateful, you actually feel better. And as you do the practice over a span of a week or 2 or even 3, you train your brain to actually notice things to be grateful for around you with more efficacy. And so as you notice more things to be grateful for, it actually in turn elevates your mood, and you realize, there are more things that are good than I realized before. I like using the analogy that I've used before, where I bought a car. I bought a Hyundai Genesis a few years ago, and I thought, this is a great car. This is for me. And between the time that I found that I wanted to buy the car and I got a good deal on it, it was about a month. And you ever had that experience where you're driving around the road and everywhere you drive, you see Hyundai Genesises? I'm like, whoa, what just happened? Did the world suddenly go out and buy more Hyundais? No, it was on my mind. And so I noticed more of them around me. If you take time to practice gratitude by writing it down each day, it's on your mind more and you notice it more around you. And it's really, really a powerful thing, and that in turn elevates your mood. My son actually grew up with a bit of a melancholic nature. And one day I was talking to him, he was in high school a few years ago. I said, hey, Steven, you seem like you're just kind of happier lately. Like anything happened or something go on? He goes, no, Dad, I just started writing down things I'm grateful for. And, it's really elevated my mood. It's made a big difference. So something I highly recommend. One sort of variation of that is just as soon as you wake up in the morning, take a deep breath and think about something you're grateful for. And just go, today I'm grateful for whatever it may be. It could be the roof over my head. Could be the fact that I have skills that are employable. I could go get a job, or maybe you have a job, or your family, whatever it may be, something that you're grateful. And then you stand up and put your feet on the ground. And that you start your day with some gratitude can really make a difference in being buoyant. So that's one powerful thing.
Rich, a couple questions about that. Folks want to know, is the key saying them out loud, writing them down? Like what does it take to trigger this effect? Okay.
The key is actually intentionally letting it sit in your mind for a little bit of time. And when you write things down, you're obviously thinking about it. If you say it out loud, you're thinking about it. Even if you think about it and without saying anything, that's actually okay too. Meng Tan calls it savoring. Just kind of for about a minute or 2, think about something grateful about and just try to replay it in your mind as vividly as possible. And so really in just 2 to 3 minutes, whether you do any of those techniques, it can actually help train your brain.
Okay.
Was there another question?
Yeah, there's another question on that a little bit. Well, I have the question or the suggestion. There's a few people in chat and in our community that they can tend to be good at spotting the dark side of things. And I think there is a danger. You know, you said practice gratitude and it will improve your mood. If you practice finding the faults, you'll get really good at finding them and the world will look pretty dark, is my experience. Is that true? Or, you know, the brain science, is
Yeah.
this a double-edged sword a little bit?
Yeah. So everything is actually about balance. There is such a thing as toxic negativity when all you see is the bad. And, you know, the more you focus, you know, whatever you focus on, you get more of.
Yep.
But there actually is a thing called toxic positivity, which you're just thinking about good things and you're ignoring the bad things, right?
Sure.
So when people talk about positive and negativity, it's on a spectrum, right? You shouldn't be fully negative because obviously there are negative repercussions. You also shouldn't be fully positive as if nothing bad is going on, because then you live as a Pollyanna outside of reality. So it's really kind of this balance. And I bring up positivity because we all tend to have a negativity bias. That's evolutionary. We tend to remember and notice negative things more readily than positive because that keeps us alive, right? Don't go over there. You're going to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. Don't eat from that bush. You know, last 10 people died, right? So remembering that's actually important. And so because we tend to lean already in that direction, we need to intentionally train ourselves to lean more in this direction to balance it out. And that's actually what positivity is about.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Please go on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so that's a powerful tool. And as we all know, there's plenty of negativity these days. Just take a look at your phone or the news. There's a steady supply.
Rich can't see chat, but yeah, we were having a discussion in chat where somebody said that one of their tools now is when they wake up, don't look at their phone.
Yes,
and
absolutely, positively. Yeah,
wildly agree with that. There's this idea of a low information diet. Like the news is so slanted towards negativity that it may be worth avoiding some of it. Not to the point of ignorance, but it's hard to be a positive person if you have a 24/7 news channel on all the time. They're sort of rage generating.
Yeah. Well, you know, if you think of the news as a giant piece of chocolate cake filled with caramel and fudge, you go, you know, it's not bad. We can have a little dessert, but we need to have a good diet filled with lots of good, you know, vegetables and protein, you know, instead of consuming that. And so what I do is I actually limit myself to a couple of pieces of news a day from trusted news sources just to keep up with what's going on around the world. But I definitely avoid doom scrolling. I do it somewhere kind of in the daytime, so I don't start or end my day with news, and I definitely limit it, and that definitely makes a big difference. So fully agree. So in terms of the another idea to help ourselves with buoyancy, it's positive and uplifting relationships. And so staying connected to people who actually help us from an emotional point of view is hugely important. Right? Think in your mind right now, who's somebody that you enjoy being around? Somebody that brings out your best qualities. Maybe makes you laugh, makes you have hope. Maybe even gives you good feedback that helps you be better. Whatever it may be, take a minute and think about that person. And I'd encourage you to set up a time to talk to them. You know, maybe over the weekend, maybe next week. Just like go, hey, haven't talked in a while. Or, hey, we don't talk enough. Like connecting with those types of relations makes a big difference. And one big thing I believe that is related to career is that our friendships should not only be in our personal life, but they should also be in our professional life. Having friends at work makes such a huge difference simply because we're at work so much. I mean, we are working now more than ever. It's 9, 10, 11, maybe more hours a day. Might as well have some friends at work rather than just like, these are just colleagues or people I have to kind of, put up with. I actually have found, and research has shown that so much of the satisfaction, enjoyment, happiness of a job absolutely has to do with the people there and the relationships you have. Friends. I'm grateful for friends like Phil and Quasi and Richard and Ethan that I met while at work. And now he's retired and I'm still at Amazon and now we're friends and doing stuff together. I mean, these things bring such an uplifting element to our lives. One kind of wild study showed that having 2 good friends at work was equivalent to earning an extra $100,000 a year in salary. Now, do not ask me where they came up with that number, but you can Google it, and it's an actual real study out there. So whether it feels like $100,000 or not, it definitely feels like a big boost to job satisfaction. So staying connected is a big one. And then a couple of final things is finding a way to serve or volunteer can make a big difference. And it doesn't have to be in huge ways. I mean, it could be like at a food bank, or it could be virtual volunteering. It could just be trying to help out your colleagues or people in your neighborhood in some way that actually helps with their buoyancy, believe it or not. Kelly McGonigal does this TED Talk, and it's called How to Make Stress Your Friend, one of the most popular ones out there. And she talks about a study where people, they found that people who underwent stressful situations generally had a higher chance of death, not surprising. But the ones who were helping other people during those stressful experiences actually did not have a higher chance of death. And that's because serving other people actually increased their resilience. As they were giving, as they were showing compassion, it actually activated their immune response in their body and made them more resilient. And so it's kind of this really interesting way that our bodies were made, that as we help others, we actually wind up helping ourselves. And so finding something meaningful to do that supports other people is actually one of the greatest things we can do. I was talking with a friend of mine who, ex-Marine, really tough guy, triathlete kind of guy. And we're having a conversation, and he said, I was really feeling down, just the last few weeks, just like really in the pit, right? Depressed, kind of down, unmotivated, didn't want to do anything. And I had another friend who needed to move during this time. And he called me up and said, hey, can you help me move? I don't have many people who can help me. Can you do it? And he's like, oh, I do not want to get out of my house and help this dude move, but I made myself do it because he's a good friend. He goes, the funniest thing happened afterwards. I felt so much better. I really wanted to stay at home and feel like, like crap, but then I helped him move and I felt so much better. And it was like, wow. And I thought, what a great example that when you actually do something for someone else, absolutely helps us with that buoyancy and even our mood. Final thing, in terms of just buoyancy in general, is this idea of adjusting your expectations but keeping your faith. And this comes from the Stockdale paradox. Put in the chat if you've heard of the Stockdale paradox, but really, really quite profound study. It was done by Jim Collins, who, of course, wrote Good to Great and, a lot of other great books, Built to Last, things like that. But he basically interviewed Admiral Stockdale, who was the highest ranking officer at a POW camp in Vietnam. And he said, what was the secret to being able to come out alive? And he basically said, Stockdale, well, there are three attitudes people had. There was total pessimism, which is we'll never get rescued, we're all going to die. Well, guess what happened? They all died. Not surprising. But then there's also total optimism, which was, oh, I'm sure we'll get rescued by Christmas. I'm sure we'll be out by Easter. I'm sure Thanksgiving will be in my warm bed at home. And guess what happened to them? They all died too.
Oh, yep.
Of disappointment.
Is a killer.
Exactly. So he was like, look, you can't be total pessimist. That's obvious. But you also can't be total optimist. That's not so obvious. You need to be somewhere in the middle, like what I talked about before with balance. You need to have realistic faith, meaning we are probably going to be here for a really long time and it's going to suck, but we will eventually get rescued someday. And you know what? Most of them made it. And it's called the Stockdale paradox because it's the idea that you can't be too pessimistic, but you also can't be too optimistic. Be realistic with faith that things will get better and that you might even come out as a better person for it. And that's what Stockdale really focused on. He goes, what can this do to actually help me become a better human being, even in the midst of some of the most horrific, challenging struggles he was in? And so the lesson here is that adjust your expectations. We're going to be in this slosh of the pandemic for quite some time. No one knows how long. I mean, we're hoping it'll be sooner, but, again, no one knows when it'll get back to any sense of normalcy. And things may get worse before they get better. We are heading into the winter time, and that's going to be a challenge. But get better they will. And we may actually look back and see this as a defining moment in our lives. And so if we can actually have that, that can actually help us be buoyant. So those are some things to help with buoyancy. I hope that they made some kind of difference in kind of thinking and mental model and framework. And There are a couple of EQ boosters that I will recommend. Also, just simple things you can do at any given moment that can help you. One is called taking a meta moment, and that's when you emotionally, it could be you're angry, you're fearful, it could be super stressed out. You could be really, upset about something. Take a meta moment. And it simply means pause, count to 10, take some deep breaths, and then just ask yourself a simple question. What would my best self do right now? Instead of blurting something out right away, instead of, punching someone in the face, instead of, following that guy who cut you off on the freeway and honking at him and doing something dangerous, pause, count, take some deep breaths, and ask yourself, what would my best self do? You know why that's powerful? Because it takes about 6 to 10 seconds for that signal sometimes to get from the middle of the brain, the amygdala, into the prefrontal cortex. So it gives your brain a little time to catch up so you can make a better decision. And that's a powerful, powerful EQ booster. I wish I would have done this more growing up. And even now, sometimes I don't do it. But in general, when I do this, definitely helps.
So, Rich, I'm going to push a little bit on this because
Okay.
I'm pretty good at counting, not reacting. I don't like literally count, but I know myself well enough to say, okay, I'm not going to be my best self right now. I need to pause. I need to reflect. I need to do something. The problem is whatever's frustrating me tends to stay in the center of my brain, and I just think about, I just have, while I count to 10 metaphysically or 100, I have time to dwell on how damn mad I am about it. And so obviously, like, I've got half of this going on, but I sit there and think about like, I'm not going to be my best self because I'm angry at this thing. And here's 10 reasons why my anger is justified. One, it's unfair. 2, I did the right thing to prevent it. 3, I paid money not to have it. By the time I get to 10, I'm as homicidal as I started. How I get this, what would my best self do, might be a shunt to change what I'm thinking about. Is there anything else?
Yes, I actually appreciate asking. So that's a corollary skill that you need to add. So this one, the meta moment, is so that you actually take some time and don't just react.
Okay.
But there's another skill that goes right along with that called reappraisal or cognitive reframing. And essentially, it's looking at it from a different perspective. And it takes practice. I'm not going to say it's easy. Counting to 10 might take practice. Sounds like you practice that a lot. But the reappraisal is a powerful, powerful technique. But we have to practice it.
Okay.
And essentially, there are kind of like many ways of doing it. One of them is essentially, reframing with gratitude. Going, okay, this generally kind of feels painful, but how could I be grateful even in this situation? How could this be good for me? How could I learn something? How can I become more resilient? How can I become better at XYZ? How can I be more empathetic by going through this experience, right? So the idea of reframing with gratitude. There's another that's reframing with generosity and going, let me give this person the benefit of the doubt. Let me not assume that they have malintent. And one of the things I often say is I go, hey, how many of us have like hurt other people's feelings, said something dumb, offended people, and how many of us generally do that on purpose, right? Like nobody raises their hand.
Very, very rare.
Generally doing it on mistake. So let's not assume other people are doing it on purpose because they're probably not.
Yeah.
And so if we just decide they probably, and there's a concept actually called Hanlon's razor, and it goes like this: do not ascribe to malice what can be ascribed to ignorance or neglect.
Yep.
And so if we just try to apply that Hanlon's razor, then it will actually help us. And there's a simpler way of remembering if you don't want to remember some, goofy psychological term, just call it Q-tip. Quit taking it personally because it's probably not personal.
I like that Q-tip.
Quit taking it personally. And so just reframing that can make a big difference. The analogy I use is, let's say, you're driving on the freeway and somebody cuts you off and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they just did that. That jerk, they try to kill me. And, you'll do certain things, follow them, honk your horn, try to run them off the road, lots of things that are not useful. You can simply just reframe and go, wow, maybe they're on the way to the hospital because a loved one is really sick and they don't even realize what they just did. And they're just worried to death. And so they made a mistake. See how different that feels? You may never find out why they did it, but it helps you to regulate. So those are two powerful reappraisal strategies. The third one I will just mention is reordering, which essentially basically goes, will I care about this in a day, in a month, in a year? Some of the things we get so amped up about, we're like, I'm not going to care about this in 1 hour. So why am I getting so wrapped around the axle? Like my wife ate some of my, pistachio ice cream. Like she ate way too much and I bought it for me. And this is my favorite ice cream. Why did she just do that? Like that was so disrespectful.
See, you're doing what I'm doing. You're starting to list the I drove to the store for that, and they don't always have it in stock. Doesn't she know it's not always in stock? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So reappraisal actually goes along with that. So excellent question.
All right. Well, thank you. The Q-tip, chat loves Q-tip.
Yeah.
I love anything that's that simple and easy to remember, the short. And I agree. My longer version I share with chat is I remind people that everyone is the hero of their own narrative. So the person who you feel is wronging you, their story to themselves is not, I'm screwing Ethan over and I'm doing it on purpose. They have some better, even if I won't agree with it, they have some better story to themselves of, hey, I'm really busy and I don't mean to turn in substandard work, or I don't mean to interrupt or whatever, but they always, everyone's the hero of their own narrative. They don't write a narrative for themselves that says, I'm just actually a mean jerk.
Yeah. That's totally true. And, I tell a funny story about that. Like, you ever taken a group photo and, you maybe ask each person in the group, hey, how do you feel about this photo? Of course, everyone looks at one person, right? Themselves. And the quality of the photo has to do with one person in that photo. It doesn't matter what anybody else looks like. So that's pretty much sort of a example of that hero narrative thing. So great question. I'm now going to head into a little bit of how you manage relationships, and the foundation of how you manage yourself. You build upon that so you can manage your relationships in a healthy, productive way. And of course, career, I mean, let's face it, it's about productivity and delivering results, but it's also all about relationships because you have to work with other people, right? There is no business without customers. There is no business without leaders and followers and all that. And so it's all about how you are with other people. And one of the concepts that I think is really powerful is about attunement. And attunement is a phrase that Daniel Pink wrote about in his book, To Sell is Human. He calls it the new ABCs of selling: attunement, buoyancy, and clarity. And he says attunement is the ability to bring one's actions and outlook into harmony with other people and with the context that you're in, right? It's getting the other person. It's having a crystal clear signal. It's not, like when you're driving out of your local radio station range and it starts crackling and popping and you're like, oh, this is my favorite song, I'm so annoyed. It's hearing it very clearly. And when we attune with other people, it's one of the most powerful things we can do from an interpersonal relationship perspective. And it takes work, and we can all get better at it. When I was first married, I was severely out of tune with many of the songs that my wife was playing on a regular basis. I was in tune with some of them, enough to get married, but I wasn't in tune with a lot of other ones. Like, for instance, when she would come down and go, hey, hon, the garbage is full. I'm like, yes, honey, it is. Great observation. I was not in tune with the fact that she was saying, can you please take it out? And so I needed to learn the frequency of, that she was on. So attunement is really powerful because once we get that, we have better interactions with customers, better interactions with our managers, our leaders, or colleagues, anybody else at work and in our interpersonal lives. And there are three keys to attunement: presence, likability, and perspective taking. Okay, there are others, but I'm going to talk about just three of them because I think these are three that we may or may not think about, but that are actually quite powerful. The first is presence, right? Presence essentially means I'm going to give you my full attention. And Daniel Goleman says it's the greatest gift you can give someone, your attention. Paying full attention with openness and being fully present is really a powerful thing. You know, I've gotten a lot of questions from people during these pandemic times. Hey, how do you connect with people online? You know, like it's virtual. People talk a lot about body language and this and that. And those are important. But the most important thing has to do with you, not the virtual medium, not with a Zoom or Chime or whether you're there physically. It's your intention to actually be there. It's your presence, right? And so the most powerful thing we can do when we meet people is to set the intention, I will be fully present. I really want to be here. I will pay attention. That goes a long, long way. And, you know, it takes a lot of practice. Few of us have this down, including myself. And, you know, studies have shown that people are distracted about 75% of the time they're listening to something. I'm sure many of you have gotten distracted during even this, you know, interview with Ethan, you know, pings here, this, that, and the other thing. And do you know what the average attention span for adults is? I mean, go ahead and put it into the chat. Some guesses on the average attention span. I'll let it kind of catch up. But you ever been in a situation where you're at a meeting or you're with some people and you really don't want to be there? You know, it's kind of obvious. You don't turn on your camera. You don't make any comments. You really don't want to, you know, be involved. Well, that, of course, is not being present. Or maybe more close at home, right? You're working, you're answering all these emails and doing this and that. And there's some kind of fire escalation going on at work, but you're supposed to go to dinner. And you go to dinner and your wife or your husband or your kids are talking and you're like zoned out. You're not even listening. Great example of not being present. And so we need to decide intentionally to be there. And that's what will actually help us to have the foundation for being attuned. Now, Ethan, do we see some guesses on?
We do. Span? We have a range of guesses. The high is 10 minutes, and I think the low is 6 seconds.
Okay.
So there's a range in there. I'd say most people are thinking under a minute. There's only a few optimists that are thinking multiple minutes.
Or maybe they're really experienced meditators. So studies have shown that the average is 22 seconds. That we can focus on something for about 22 seconds before we go, hey, look, there's a squirrel, right? Before something kind of enters our mind. And so as you can, you know, guess, it takes practice to be fully present. And so we just even hear anything from this talk today, if we want to really connect, just making sure we intend to be there makes such a huge difference. You know, there's a quote I heard, where you place your attention, you live your life. And so if we more fully decide to live our lives there, it can make a big difference. And one thing that I do, you know, even at the job that I found to be useful is sometimes I'm distracted. I just got a lot going on. I just push my meeting. I go, hey, do you mind if I just change this meeting to tomorrow? I really can't be fully present. I got so much stuff going on. Better to change a meeting, better to make it shorter, better to do something different if you can so you can be 100% there than to sort of, you know, be half there and no one's happy with that, right? Presence. The second thing is likability. Ask yourself a question. How likable am I? You know, how likable do you think you are? And maybe you've never thought about it. Maybe you're like, I never really even thought about it. The first thing I want to say is that studies have shown that you're already more likable than you think you are. You know, people can tend to be a little negative on themselves, right? Like, oh, did I talk too long? Did my facial expression, you know, we're pretty hard on ourselves. Negativity bias, remember that? But studies have shown you're already more likable. People don't judge you as harshly as you may think because we're not doing that to other people, right? So that's the foundation. So remember that. But the second thing is we can actually be more attuned if we strive to increase our likability. Robert Cialdini, who wrote a book called Influence, he found that there were 6 keys to influencing people, and likability was definitely one of them. And if you think about it, I mean, who would you rather listen to? You know, their opinions, somebody you like or somebody you don't like? I mean, it's sort of obvious human nature, right? I'm probably going to be more open to being influenced by somebody I like. So So increasing our likability actually can make a big difference when it comes to tuning to people, especially over the internet when we don't get to be there in person. And there's some very simple things we can do that if we intentionally, work on them a bit, can make us more likable. One of them is uncovering genuine similarities, finding things that, we have in common. And here's the good news. We all have lots and lots of things in common. We have lots of things that are different to make us unique, and that's great. We also have a lot of things that are in common, right? I came from the Midwest. I came from Chicago. I went to Downers Grove South High School. I was doing a presentation for a bunch of people at Amazon. I go, that's where I was. And somebody went, no stinking way. I went to Downers Grove South High School. What are the chances of that? And I thought, wow, that connection, we just both laughed. So if you can uncover some, it's actually quite powerful. You ever like sat somewhere, maybe on a park bench or public transportation, and you saw somebody who had the t-shirt of your favorite sports team or rock band, went to a concert. You're like, hey man, go Bears, or hey, go Niners, or, Seattle, go Seahawks. And you suddenly had this 15-minute conversation with a total stranger. You know nothing about them, but you found one thing that was a similarity, and that was enough to connect you. So finding that makes you more likable. The second thing is uncovering genuinely admirable features. And simply put, it's just being willing to admire people and pay them a compliment. Say something nice, say something kind. Because here's the deal. We have so many negative things flying around. There's no shortage of, criticisms and negativity and bad things and things to improve. When we say something complimentary, it can make a huge difference. It's one of the fundamental things that Dale Carnegie talks about and how to win friends and influence people. Right? Pay compliments where you can, whether it's at work or at home or the cashier, for the takeout. Thanks for delivering that to my door. Thanks for working during this tough time. Those things make a difference. And Mark Twain once said, I can live for 2 months on a good compliment. So if we're willing to do that, it can really make a huge difference for our own likability. And the final thing in terms of likability is just our attitude. Right? It's adopting a really useful attitude. Did you know that emotions are contagious and our emotions impact the people around us? So if we have a certain feeling or, mood, then other people will catch it. It's because of these mirror neurons that are actually in our brain. We actually have these neurons that fire at the same mood or emotion that other people around us do. And you've all experienced it. You've been around a bunch of happy people and just feel lifted, or a bunch, people complaining or bitter or griping, just feel kind of down. And so our attitude can make a big difference with people around us, whether or not they like us. Right? I'll give you an example of it. Let's say you encounter someone on the job that you have to do a project with. Would you rather work with this person, or would you rather work with this person? Okay, we all kind of laugh, right? Because there's a visceral response. Now, okay, I will say we're obviously making a judgment. We don't know these people. Something might be going on. So I'm not actually talking about that part. I'm just talking about our visceral reaction. When you see the first person, it kind of makes you go like this, naturally. When you see the second person, you're kind of like, ooh, that might be a little scary. And again, I'm not talking about the need to have empathy. I'm talking about our emotional reaction to somebody. That second person is going to need to do some work to overcome the initial reaction that the other people will have to her. And I'm just sharing that because when it comes to likability, having a useful attitude can make a huge difference. And there's some that I'll share with you that actually are quite compelling. The first is happiness and laughter, just being willing to be upbeat and joyful and happy, excited, enthusiastic. That can make a big difference. One of the big tips that people give when you go to an interview is be enthusiastic, right? Like, don't be like, I could take this job or leave it, right? Obviously, having some enthusiasm makes a difference. I'm sure Ethan's talking about that. Yes. But that's just in any interpersonal relationship. The second one is interest, genuine interest and curiosity. Did you know that people get more pleasure from self-disclosure, like talking about things that are meaningful to them, than food, money, or sex? People love talking about their story. And if we have a genuine interest and are willing to listen to them, that is one of the most powerful things we can do to be both interesting and also attuned and likable. Jim Collins actually famously wrote that successful leaders, rather than trying to be interesting, try to be interested. And those are some of the most successful leaders in the world. Jeff Bezos, our own founder at Amazon, somebody asked him a while back, what's your superpower? He said, curiosity, right? There's a lot there. And I heard this interview with Oprah Winfrey that was actually really amazing. She obviously is one of the most incredibly empathetic and greatest interviewers in the world. And she said, you know what? I have interviewed so many people, thousands upon thousands, and every single person from Barack Obama to a dad who is in prison asked me the exact same question at the end of my interview. And you know what it was? It was, how was that? Was that okay? And what she realized was that every single person wanted to know the answer to one question. And that is, did you hear me? Was what I said meaningful to you? And so when we're willing to do that for other people, makes us incredibly likable and attuned. And then the final thing is pretty simple. Ethan likes simple things, but if you remember anything from this slide, just remember this one thing. If you like other people, there's a very high chance they will like you. That's pretty much all of this. And so if you decide to go into the attitude of, hey, I'm going to assume I like people, like unless otherwise proven, right? And that's going to be very, very rare. If I just decide I'm going to like them, I'm going to find reasons to believe that opinion, but I come in with that attitude, you're going to be very, very, very high likelihood they'll decide to like you back. That's just part of our human nature, that people will like those who like them. And so very, very powerful thing.
Rich, have you ever happened across a book called Leadership and Self-Deception?
No, I have not. That sounds interesting.
It is, and the two-word summary of it would be this part about liking them. The chat knows it's one of my favorite books. I recommend all the time, Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute. And the way I explain it really simplistically is, you talked earlier about helping your friend move. If your friend asks you to move on a rainy day when you were going to watch football, you will consider it, even though it's a huge ask. If someone you dislike drops their pencil and asks you to pick it up, your first thought is, screw you, get it yourself. And that's how much power there is. You'll go out in the rain for a whole day and hump boxes and furniture for the person that likes you and that you like. And for the person that doesn't like you'll struggle, even though you may decide, well, I guess I better look good here, or maybe I'm a bigger person, to bend over and pick up a pencil off the floor for the person that you really don't get along with. And there's much more in this book, but it talks a lot about how we treat others determines how they're going to treat us. And that's where I find the power in it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. One thing too, is I will note, and I appreciate that context, right, from what you just said, is this does not mean you're always going to be liked.
Nope.
Likability is not like everyone's going to like me and popularity becomes my goal. Obviously not. The point is that, hey, if you're generally going to be either liked or disliked, you should be generally liked. But there's going to be times when you have to make unpopular decisions, things that people don't necessarily agree with. There's going to, as the great philosopher, has said, haters are going to hate. So there's going to be people out there who, will dislike you no matter what. It's Taylor Swift, obviously a joke. But the point is that's going to happen. And so you're going to be unliked at some points, but thinking about in general, the likelihood can make a huge, huge difference. So thank you for that context. And final thing I will share is the ability to have perspective taking. And I call it empathy plus, right? And one of the things I like to show is this picture. Like, put in the chat what you see in that picture, right? What does that look like to you? And obviously, it's going to be one of two choices. Some people put a rabbit or bunny. Other people put a duck. And so my challenge, if you see a duck, try to see the rabbit. If you see a rabbit, try to see a duck. Is it hard? Is it easy? Do you see it? Is it there? Funny kind of experiment mentally. Now here's another one. What do you see here? And again, I often see different things. Some people will say, oh, that's an old lady looking downwards. Others will say, oh, that's a young lady looking away. And again, if you see the old lady, try to see the young lady. If you see the young lady, try to see the old lady, right?
I find that
Because,
one a lot harder to switch between. It
ah,
took me a minute. I've seen this. This is a famous
yeah,
drawing,
it is. Yep.
and it definitely took me a while to get the old lady to pop out.
Yeah, yep. And so the question is, well, who's right? I mean, is it a young lady or an old lady? And you already know the answer. No one's right because no one's wrong. It's a matter of perspective. And this is just sort of a metaphor for life in all relationships. We all have different perspectives because of our experience and just the way we view the world. And so one of the most powerful things for attunement is perspective taking. And I call it empathy plus because it means understanding what they're feeling and also what they're thinking. Understanding the feeling is important, but understanding what they're thinking is also just as important so that we can actually attune to people. Studies, from the INSEAD School of Business have shown that it increases sales, we have better outcomes in negotiations, we're more influential. It's even the number one technique for hostage negotiators. What they do is they go, okay, how do I establish some kind of perspective taking and empathy? They call it tactical empathy, with the person who's taking hostages. They obviously do not agree with them, what they're doing, but they need to establish that sense of rapport, to even have a conversation. Were you gonna say something, Ethan?
No, not at all. I mean,
Oh,
there is this fascinating story, super briefly, of a hostage negotiator in New York who negotiated a guy out of holding a bunch of hostages by relating to him about how bad either the Yankees or the Mets were playing. Like the connection was on, sports, and
yeah.
yet by forming that, like, I get you connection, was able to talk down this guy who was, I don't know, obviously in a very bad place, about to do something super harmful.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I believe that was Chris Voss, actually. He wrote a book called Never Split the Difference. And he has replete with lots and lots of wild stories, just like that one, right?
Yeah.
But the point is, right, that if it works for hostage negotiators in literally life or death situations, it's probably going to work for you and your kids trying to get them to eat their vegetables, or your boss and trying to talk about getting an opportunity, to work on something. So the point is, or with your customers that you're trying to, influence and hopefully some kind of mutual win-win sort of way, right? So it really is about curiosity and being a good listener, right? Asking lots of questions and listening until you get to the core of what they're really thinking. Finding, from Ethan's example, they found a commonality that made them a little more likable to each other. And then, of course, the negotiator was asking questions to understand, where they're coming from, what they're doing. And again, remember what I said earlier? People get so much from self-disclosure. If we actually let people talk, gives us what we need to really understand them and then hopefully help them, right? And so clarifying, saying things like, hey, please help me understand this more, or can you clarify this point? I don't quite understand it. And then reflecting or paraphrasing is so incredibly important. Hey, so it sounds like what you're saying is, so it feels like, the situation is this, or if I understand correctly, in summary, what you're saying is this. Like, reflecting back shows them, oh, you actually took the time to listen. And the two most powerful words that somebody else can say to you is, that's right. That tells you got them, right? So if I understand correctly, that's right. And that's actually what Chris Voss talks about a lot in his book. Like, that's the main thing he really tries to get people to be able to say, because that establishes that connection. And I'll give you a little pro tip. Even if someone's really mad at you, a lot of times we're like, man, I do not want to deal with you, man. You are just out of control. You're disrespectful. This is out of hand. It may be our spouse. It may be our, bratty teenage kid that we think is, out of control. Or it could be, a coworker. But one of the most powerful things we can do is get them to say, that's right. And how do you do that? You do it by taking their perspective. Even if they're yelling and they're mad and they're upset, well, so it seems like you're feeling really upset about the fact that I made that comment in that meeting. and you felt really offended because it seemed like it was demeaning. That's right. See what just happened? If you actually establish a sense of commonality and you actually want to understand, that's one of the most powerful things I can do to help diffuse intense emotions. Because a lot of times people get angry because they're like, I'm going to have to push to get you to listen. But if you show that you're going to be willing to listen right away, that actually helps you have a more productive interaction and conversation. So powerful technique that can really make a big difference is perspective taking. So I'm going to conclude here with just one thought, and then we can take some Q&A. We actually wound up being at the time that you mentioned, Ethan, so you were more prescient than I was. And that is, what one quality do you think denotes a high EQ and separates great leaders from average ones?
Oh boy, this seems good to have chat say for a minute.
Yeah, please put that in the chat. I'd love to see
quality
what you think is the one quality that most denotes a high EQ and separates great leaders from average ones. You know, there's a lot of things we could say, a lot of things we've talked about, but what do you think? And this is the thing I actually use when I really look at someone. I go, do they have a high emotional intelligence? This is actually the one I look for, and I go, I wonder where they're at with this particular quality, because it does actually tell me a lot.
Wow, the answers in chat are all good. The first answer really struck me, which was modesty. Compassion, sympathy, listening, understanding, humility. I would say listening and compassion, servant leadership.
Awesome.
Yeah, there's a long, being present. There's a long list here.
Yeah. You guys are obviously a great and very smart and aware crowd, right? So there's no right answer, but I will tell you the one that Daniel Goleman does say he feels is the ultimate manifestation, and it is compassion. And compassion actually embodies all the things you guys put out on chat, because it means I understand you, your thoughts, your feelings, your goals, your dreams, your pains, and I want to help you. I want to alleviate your pain. I want to support your goals. I want to help you see your dreams come true. That is the ultimate form of emotional intelligence. And of course, that takes modesty and humility, because it takes thinking about someone else rather than ourselves. And it takes empathy, because we have to understand what they're thinking and feeling. But it turns that I understand into I'm going to do something. And that ultimately is really the most powerful form of emotional intelligence. And when you think about all the things we're trying to do today in the world, help each other during these pandemic times, every company, including Amazon, wants to be more inclusive and diverse and equitable. We want to fight racial injustice. We want to take care of each other, both personally, professionally. All these things, if we were more compassionate, so many of these things would come true, because that buoys all these things that we're trying to accomplish. And so those are all powerful things that I think can make a difference. So I'll just kind of end with some resources, and we'll take some Q&A. I want to encourage you to practice one of these techniques for 30 days, like whether it's the 3x3 or, some breathing or whatever it may be. These things can all really make a difference. And if you try them out, I would love to hear, maybe over LinkedIn, how it worked out for you. I encourage you to build an EQ community to practice and grow together. You only need one other person and you can kind of work together to become better. And if you believe in these things, become an EQ advocate at your work. It could be simply by helping other people, sharing techniques you've learned, just even sharing gratitude, in your meetings. So many things can be done. And then finally, if you want more resources, I've actually created a website, richardhua.co, with a lot of resources, trainings, books, things like that you can leverage if you want to find out more stuff. But yeah, lots can be done there. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Ethan, for some Q&A. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, no problem. Go ahead and kill your screen share, and I'll take us back to just the two of us. And folks have put in some good questions. I think you really answered mine. So we'll skip it. It was about kind of the counting to 10 problem, where I tried to count to 10 and I didn't fully succeed. But I think thinking about how could I be more empathetic here would have been, for me, the secret in that particular case would have made a huge difference. So the first question I have before we get to real questions, we were having a little problem on my end with the slides being clipped on one side. Can you send me the slides so that I can post them for
Yep.
people after we're
Absolutely.
done?
Will do.
Great.
Yep.
That's huge. So, folks, they'll end up in our Discord soon. I won't. I won't. I know Rich has a 2 o'clock, so I don't know when he'll get to it, and that's totally fine. But we will post them. And thank you, Rich. For actual questions, the first question, and I like this when I ask people to move it here. How do we manage to stay positive if the boss you work for is constantly toxic and negative? And I would say I get variations of this question a lot, which is, what do I do when my boss is a tough person?
Yeah. So that is a challenging one, right? And the thing that we need to focus on is controlling what we can control and not stressing so much about what we can't control. If the environment around us, whether it's our boss, a colleague, the job we have situation, there's not a ton we can do about that sometimes, but we can actually focus on reframing with a sense of gratitude and generosity. And the gratitude meaning, hey, how could this possibly help me develop some things that will ultimately make me a better person or better employee, right? One of the things I actually, and even though this is pretty dramatic, it's from Viktor Frankl, right? He talked about this idea of tragic optimism, that even in some of the worst, most horrific situations, to understand there's some meaning that can come from this situation. He, of course, was, a Holocaust survivor in a concentration camp. So that kind of attitude can certainly help us to deal with that. Now, long term, though, just my personal opinion, I would try to get a different job with somebody else, which may or may not be possible in the short term. But if we employ these strategies and we make a difference and we are a linchpin and we make a contribution as we're growing and learning and we build these relationships, even if the current situation isn't ideal, if we try to handle as well as we can and then look for other opportunities, they will come. And I do believe in the idea that the cream does rise. It may not rise today or tomorrow or immediately, but if we do the right things, eventually we will get to the opportunities that can be more amenable and positive for our lives. So there's kind of a shorter term, and then a longer term, I think, kind of attitude.
You really do read a lot, but to have Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning, like you've covered dramatic ground on all the things that you bring up, and so we'll go on to the next question. But I would just say, for everyone here, look, I struggle to get the time to read. Find a way, audiobooks, podcasts, it doesn't matter. There's so much, because so much good thinking has gone in out there, and it really can help you. So, okay. Let's see. Next question is, if you're the giving kind, all caps, how do you prioritize who to help? There isn't enough time to help everyone. This is a great question.
It is.
So
okay.
I'll let you answer, and then I may say a couple things. Go ahead.
So I'm going to quote Adam Grant, who wrote this book, Give and Take, which made a profound impact on me. He found that the most successful people in life are givers, and he found that the most unsuccessful people in life are givers. And you may think, well, how does that make any sense? Well, he basically categorized people into givers, matchers, and takers, right? And he found that most people are givers interpersonally, but most people are matchers in, the professional realm. And then, some people are Machiavellian or whatever, and they're the takers. And so the point was, you need to be a giver in general, because that's good karma. That's going to build relations. We've already talked about that. But you also need to be a bit strategic in that if you're interacting with a taker, they'll take everything you got. So you have to basically kind of say, you know what, this is not healthy. That is not going to be the strategy I have with that person. However, most people are matchers. And so if you give to a matcher, they're going to generally give back. And so that kind of produces a virtuous cycle. Now, giver doesn't just mean you do whatever for whoever asks. There does have to be some thought behind it, where it's a general mental mindset, but you also have to be clear in your mind, what am I trying to accomplish? What am I trying to do? And I believe that within that framework, being a giver is going to be more helpful. One little rule of thumb I use is Adam Grant calls it the 5-minute favor, which is if you can do someone a favor in 5 minutes or less, just do it. Like, you're not going to be asked that many favors all the time. If you can just do it. And that can actually build, a good sort of build up of giving.
Well, you raised a great point. I'll speak very quickly so we can get to a couple more questions before you have to go. My community is supported by volunteers who've come here, seen what we've done, and then reached out to me and say, how can I help? And so all the videos we put out on YouTube, et cetera, they're all edited by volunteers, things like that. So to your point, people will match you. I didn't set out to be matched, but tons of people help. And then the second thing is scale. You're figuring out how to scale your class at Amazon by training other teachers. One of the reasons I took up doing things here was I couldn't give enough one-on-one. And so through Twitch and other mechanisms, I'm able to give to a larger audience. And I think you're doing that as well. So to the person who asked, I would say, never feel bad that you can't help everyone. Rich and I started by saying we share a Christian heritage. Jesus himself said the poor will be always with you. So he recognized this problem 2,000 years ago. And whether you believe he existed or not, or was a great moral philosopher or the Son of God, if that answer was good enough for him, the people who need your help will be always with you. Your job's to do what you can. Next question from the audience is, would you prioritize giving to others or reading more? I would just say, before Rich jumps in, that's framed as an either or. A better way to look at it is the more educated I am, the more I will be able to give. And the more I've given to others, they may help me out in ways that help me find time to read. Like it's not necessarily a zero-sum game. That said, Rich, ball to you.
The only thing I'd say is I think giving is a mental mindset, and each situation is going to be a little different. So it has to work within the framework of what you're trying to do. If there is a general attitude, I want to be a giver, then, the day-to-day decisions may be different. Sometimes you got to give it yourself so you can prepare to be more giving. Other times, there's something right in front of you and you feel, compelled to do it. So I think it's situational, but is it more of a mindset of being a giver rather than a taker and even a matcher?
Yeah. There's so many ways to slide this one. I give in the form of book recommendations, and to do that, I have to have read them. So I'm enabling myself. Rich, it looks like it's close to 2. I'll take one more, and then if you have to jump off, that's totally understandable. What were the most useful experience or aspects of your ministry job that you're continuing to use?
I think the 2 most useful ones were empathy, perspective taking. Really, obviously as a minister, as a counselor, I had to really understand some pretty intense stuff. I mean, everything from career and job stress to people who were on the verge of divorce to people who are dealing with trauma or abuse. I mean, there's a lot of things there. And so I think practicing that, listening, understanding, eliciting what's really there in their heart and their mind was super powerful, because that's just key to any successful interpersonal relationship. And the second thing was, I'd say, inspirational leadership. And I say that specifically because, management and leadership are 2 different things. I think a lot of people would agree. Management just gets the trains running on time, delegation, telling people what to do. But inspirational leadership is really the key to making anything happen. And I got a lot of practice motivating a bunch of unpaid volunteers who could just tell me to take a hike at any given moment because they were part of my congregation. I mean, they paid me, I didn't pay them. So I had to inspire them and motivate them. And now what I'm doing at Amazon is with a team of hundreds and, the group, a community of thousands, hundreds of about 120 EQ champions, and then several thousand people who are part of the community. None of them have to do it. It's all volunteer. It's on their own time a lot of times. And I'm having to inspire them to work with me to do this across Amazon. So this idea of inspirational leadership, I think, has really been very, very valuable in making things happen in really all contexts. So yeah, thank you very much. I was just going to say thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. You've been a fabulous guest. I love the story of your career pivots and the things you've achieved. It's a broad range, been all over the world, done fascinating things. And then I love the fact you're sharing and giving in this way. So Rich, it's always a pleasure. Rich is working on some stuff we can't even talk about publicly yet. He's got big plans in the works. And so I encourage you to check out his website, which I didn't know existed because he's obviously putting materials there. He'll send the slides over when he gets a chance. We'll post them in Discord. And Rich, I certainly look forward to seeing what else you accomplish.
Awesome. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much to you, Ethan, and everyone who's been on. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.